La Gran Renuncia es auspiciado por Workation Planet, la agencia de retiros empresariales en los mejores entornos rurales de la Argentina. Si eres gerente de una empresa remota o híbrida, te ayudamos a fortalecer la conexión entre tus colaboradores compartiendo experiencias grupales únicas en un entorno de plena naturaleza. Y si eres nómada digital, te invitamos a sumarte a nuestra comunidad para descubrir los mejores destinos de Argentina mientras trabajas. Ingresa a www.workationplanet.co y entérate de todo lo que tenemos para ofrecerte. Workation Planet te invita a disfrutar el siguiente episodio de La Gran Renuncia. Bienvenido a un nuevo episodio de La Gran Renuncia. En el capítulo de hoy vamos a hablar con Mike Vardy. Mike es autor, orador y estratega de la productividad y gestión del tiempo. Él reside en este momento en Victoria, Canadá.
Bienvenidos a La Gran Renuncia. Claves para una gerencia remota.
¿Qué tal, Mike? Bienvenido a La Gran Renuncia. Bueno, la primera consulta es si nos puedes hablar de el trabajo remoto y la productividad en las empresas.
Well, last year I spoke at a conference called Running Remote in Portugal. And one of the things I did was I was in a conversation with David Allen, who wrote the book Getting Things Done a number of years ago. And one of the things that we talked about was, well, how do people who work remotely stay productive? Like, what do they do? Because they're not just working on their own, they're working probably with other people who are working remotely in other parts of the world, right? And no matter whether you're working on your own or whether you're working with a team, when you work remotely, the benefits, the good things is that you do have a lot more say about when you can do the work that you want to do. But that is both a blessing, but it can also be a curse. And that's where your productivity can take a bit of a hit, where you can lose productivity. So I believe that one of the best things that remote work has allowed people to do is work in a way that best suits their energy levels, their lifestyle. So, for example, I'm a night owl. I'm somebody who stays up really, really late. I've always been that way. And so in a normal work environment, a 9 to 5 job, I didn't do as well because it took me longer to be more productive because I wasn't really awake at 9 a.m. when I would get to the job. And so with remote work, one of the ways you can be productive is to understand when you are at your best, when your energy levels are higher, but also when they are lower. And then what you can do, and I see this happen a lot, is you can say, okay, well, what are my tasks that I need to do that are tasks that are either low energy or low intensity? In other words, they won't take a lot of effort. They may not take a lot of time. So I should do those when I don't have a lot of energy. So for someone like me, I would do those things earlier in the day, right? But if you're not a night owl, let's say you're an early riser, you would do those at the end of the day. And then if you have tasks or things on your to-do list that are harder to do, they're deeper, they need more focus, more effort, more attention, more energy, you would do those when you are at your best, when you are more productive, when you feel like you can do more stuff, right? So then you would try to kind of align your time with those kind of tasks. So when you're working as a remote worker, you have more opportunity to do this because nobody's looking over your shoulder asking, hey, how are you doing with this work? What's going on? I like to say you have more agency, you have more control. So that to me is one of the biggest benefits of remote work, is that it can allow you to be more productive as long as you start to put strategies and tips in place that will allow you to do things like listen to your body clock and things like that.
También puedo trabajar remoto y tener un jefe que me hostigue todo el tiempo de manera remota. Entonces la pregunta es si solamente el trabajo remoto me hace aprovechar mejor mi energía, digamos, si el trabajo remoto, en tanto por ser remoto nada más me hace aprovechar mejor mi energía o digamos, o hay algunas otras posibilidades, porque como te digo, si tenemos un trabajo remoto pero seguimos con la práctica de micromanagement, la energía se nos va por otro carril. ¿Cómo lo ves?
So if you have a boss that is micromanaging you, like you say, or wants to, the thing about remote work is that there has to be trust. There has to be trust from the person that is in charge.
So it's a big
Yes,
value, the trust.
it
What
is.
happened with the trust and the remote work?
Yeah, that's so the hard part is people associate, if I see you here, then you must be working. So if you're in the office, even you could be in the office and not doing any really rewarding or impactful work. But because you're there, people assume that you are being productive. And that happens, that's happened forever. There are lots of people who go to the workplace and they could get all that work done in 4 hours, but because they have to be there for 8, they spread it out. They're not as productive as they could be. But the reason that people uh that remote work has is harder for people who have never really either led a team that has said, "Hey, we will do remote work," is because it does involve that trust. So it's up to leaders, the managers, to say, "Hey, I am going to trust you that you are going to get the work done even though I can't see you." And that's hard. That's very hard for somebody who has always been seeing people in the office and going, "Well, if you're here, then I can come see you and see that you're working, or I can call you, or I can." And so one of the things that you have to do as a remote worker is you have to set boundaries. And that's hard because you have to say, "Look, I'm not going to answer emails as quickly. I'm not going to answer these things as quickly as you might like, because or that they might want you to, because that's how you show that you are actually working well, by not being in front of them all the time." And that you won't be able to do that with everybody right away. So whenever I talk to somebody about this stuff, I ask them to test it with one person. So you may not be able to test it with that super micromanager, but there might be a colleague, like somebody that you work with, that you don't respond to those emails as soon as they come in. Or you say, "Hey, I'm going to be working between, let's say, 10 a.m. and 12 as I'm working on this project." So in a fostered yet, like it hasn't really taken hold, things that you can do as a remote worker are use your calendar to show what you can see. So from 10 of your work. And that way, even though they can't see you, they can see on your calendar that this is what you should be working on. So those are some of the things you can do in a workspace that is either new to having remote workers, or if you have a boss or colleagues that are so used to being able to talk to you like that, like immediately and instantly. You have to establish trust. And the only way to establish trust is to let go a little bit of this control of, you're in Portugal and I'm in the United States. I can't see what you're doing. So I have to, but I also know that if I don't give you the time and space to do that work, then you're not going to be as productive. So the calendar can be super helpful for that.
Bueno, ¿y qué sucede en este sentido con el trabajo asincrónico?
No?
Well, and asynchronous is great because asynchronous, and I work asynchronously with my team. I have people that there's nobody that on my team that is not remote. So we use tools like ClickUp, Notion. There are several tools out there that you can see what people are doing, what boxes they're checking off, without having to be in the same room or same city or same country as them. So asynchronous tools are really, really valuable, as long as you are willing to set boundaries to say, "Look, if you want to see me do this stuff, just look at our tool and it will tell you what I'm doing." But if you are calling me to ask or interrupting me to ask, like asynchronous, that's the point, is that if you're getting people that are constantly contacting you over Slack or a task management tool or whatever, and they expect you to respond right away, that's not working asynchronously. That's them trying to work synchronously with asynchronous tools. It'd be like if you and I were in the same room and I said, "Hey, Christian, are you doing that thing?" And you ignored me. Like I'd be standing there going, "It's Christian, Christian, Christian," because I'm there. But if you're not here, there's no I don't know if you see me like online or whatever. I don't know what you're working on. So I have to, as the leader, trust that when I see that check mark go off, or when you type in, "Oh, I finally saw your message. Sorry, was working on like this other project." That's what asynchronous is. So the biggest problem, to your point, is that we have leaders and also colleagues and coworkers trying to use asynchronous tools synchronously. So they're defeating the purpose of it. And that's when you have to set boundaries and say, you know what, if you want to see what I'm doing, check the tool. The tool will tell us. And that takes leadership. And that's again, it's not a quick fix. It's not it takes time because it's building trust. And trust doesn't just show up, it has to be built.
¿Y cuál es para vos la mejor herramienta para trabajar de manera sincrónica, la mejor herramienta digital? Si te gusta nuestro contenido, te pedimos que nos ayudes a difundirlo siguiéndonos en Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube o desde la plataforma que nos estés escuchando. También puedes suscribirte a nuestro newsletter podcastlagranrenuncia@gmail.com y te haremos llegar todas las novedades acerca de gerenciamiento y trabajo remoto. Seguimos escuchando La Gran Renuncia.
Okay.
Slacks, for example.
Yeah, no, I know. So it's really interesting because I get a lot of questions about like, what's the best tool? What's the best this? And I always ask, well, it depends because it depends on how many people are on the team. It depends on, do you want tools that do one thing really, really well, or do you want tools that do a bunch of things pretty good? I would say that whenever I look at a set of tools or a suite of tools to work asynchronously, or even just to work in general, I kind of look at, there's like 5 different types of tools. There's the task management tool, there's the to-do list, right? Then there's the calendar, then there's the communication tool, which would be like you talk about, like your Slack and things like that. Then there's email, and then there's like a note-taking tool, right? Like where you can keep your references and information and things like that. So for some organizations, they want to have it all in one place. I believe Slack is great in a lot of ways. And the mission of Slack early on was to try to help people get out of email. But Slack has become the very thing that it tried to keep people from doing, because Slack was meant for messaging so that you wouldn't email as much between coworkers and colleagues. But now everyone is slacking all the time. So you never really have a chance to get away from Slack to do the work that you're trying to do. So I think Slack is great as a tool for instant communication internally, as long as it's not the place where you're not using it as a place to check off tasks. You can use Slack to integrate with other tools. So a tool like, when we talk about task management tools or project management tools, and I mean, ClickUp is one that I like. I like Notion. I like Todoist. Todoist actually was at the remote work conference I was at last year, and they've been going every year. They're big. The company Todoist is big on remote work. And what I like about those tools, let's say Todoist and Notion and ClickUp, we'll use those in specifically, is you could actually not have to use Slack if you use those tools, because they have comments and messages built into those tools. But what's great is they are connected to whatever the task is that are in there. So let me give you an example really quick, Christian. Is, let's say you have to build a website for someone, and inside, go ahead. Give me you go ahead and go ahead. I'll let you go. Go ahead.
¿Y qué pensás acerca de WhatsApp?
Oh, WhatsApp. Okay. So I'll circle back to my example in a minute, but WhatsApp is it's a lot like Slack. It's a lot like it's instant messaging. WhatsApp is, and again, in North America, WhatsApp is used very differently than in other parts of the world. WhatsApp is WhatsApp is not as popular in North America. People will use things like Facebook Messenger, as weird as that sounds, or just direct text messaging. But WhatsApp, I think the thing about WhatsApp, especially because it is owned by Meta, which is a company, obviously they're owning, they own Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff, is with WhatsApp, you need to be very clear with your boundaries on that app, because you're going to get personal messages on WhatsApp, but you're also going to get work messages on WhatsApp. So it's kind of like if you had one email address for work and home, you have to be very clear about when you respond to certain things, because if you're working, you shouldn't be answering your home emails. And if you're at home, you shouldn't necessarily be answering work emails. So WhatsApp kind of is the same. I would say that if you're going to give people your WhatsApp number, it's usually for networking purposes and connecting, not, hey, can you do this thing for me? I would not be using it as a tool to get people to work on things per se. It's more of again, to me, it operates a lot more like text messaging, both for personal use and professional use. So that's where I would stand with that. But let me go back to the example of using, say, a tool like ClickUp, for example, or Notion or Todoist. If you have a task that says work on website, which is not a great name for a task because it's a project, but let's just say that's what it is. If you have that task in any of those apps and you're working with other people, they can comment and message you in that task itself. So that means that there's context. If someone's messaging you in there, you already know that they're asking you about that very particular thing, which is great, because then you're in the tool that you should be doing the work in. Whereas if it's Slack, they could be talking to you about anything. There's no connection between, like, they could be talking to you about the website project, which means they're pulling you out of the place where you're actually doing the work. So what I like Slack, if people use Slack, what I tend to see it used for, and what I recommend, is more of a, we don't have a project or a task for this yet. This is where things happen before we move them into ClickUp or Todoist or Asana or Notion. So it acts as kind of like a bridge. That's the way I look at it. And I also say that if you're using Slack, then Slack is for internal communications between everybody in your business. And then email becomes the place where it's all external. So you shouldn't be sending an email to somebody in your organization if you have Slack, because Slack can do that, or your task manager can do that. But email is for people that are not inside your organization. So you'll send things to people that aren't connected to your Slack or connected to ClickUp or whatever. So as long as you're really intentional and deliberate with those tools, and you set those, again, we're back to boundaries again. You say, like, this is what we use it for, and you're very clear about that, then it makes using those asynchronous tools or tools for even synchronous work, you know how they're going to be used, and it removes a lot of the friction and allows you to actually be more productive.
Quería consultarte acerca del trabajo remoto y el gerenciamiento del tiempo. Vi un artículo de LinkedIn que has publicado muy interesante justamente acerca de esto, de cómo nos podía ayudar el trabajo remoto en el gerenciamiento de nuestro tiempo. ¿Qué pensás?
Yes, I would say that, I mean, when people said remote work was a problem, and we're seeing some people that are pushing back against remote work, they want people to get back to the offices and things like that. The genie is already out of the bottle. When COVID-19 happened, remote work started to happen. And by the way, it was going to happen anyway, Christine. Like, and you know this, remote work was already on its way. People were already working remotely. And what's great about it is that remote work allows people to manage their relationship with time and how they handle their time far better than if they go into the office. Because number one, again, we'll go back to the energy equation, which is, if you're not very good in the mornings, then you can work on things that really don't require a lot of your energy. And if you're not very good at night, you could do the same thing. Whereas if you are very good at night, then you can work that way. You can work the way that you are going to be most productive when you work remotely. As long, again, and we'll throw the little caveat in here, as long as your organization has trust in remote work, which is hard because, again, it's still something that is relatively new for organizations to embrace. The thing that you can do with remote work too is, and I talk about time crafting, which is the framework that I teach, is that you with remote work, when it comes to time, you can set aside like themed time periods where, hey, like, so for example, today is my community day. So my focus, my overarching focus for the day is to do tasks that are associated with my community, which means that my focus and attention are drawn to those types of tasks. It's harder to do that when you're not working remotely because you do have all those distractions and disruptions that are in your face. Like they're in your face, right? You can also do things like I call this horizontal theming, where you could say, hey, from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock every day, I'm going to focus on writing. It's harder to get away with that when you're in the same building as somebody. Remote work allows you to have a lot more freedom and agency with your time. And that's why I think remote work, when done right, both from the worker side, but more importantly from the manager side, can be more productive for organizations across the board.
Es un gran tema el tiempo y el trabajo porque es una relación que viene de hace muchísimo tiempo, ya desde la revolución industrial, primero trabajando 12 horas, después la lucha por trabajar 8 horas, y esta relación me parece que se impregna mucho en nuestra mente, también podría decir que se impregna un poco en nuestro cuerpo, esta relación entre cuánto tiempo trabajo, cuál es el verdadero tiempo que hay que trabajar.
Well,
¿No?
and Christian, I want to share a quick story with you because I think it's important that people understand, and I've learned to understand this because I've studied time management productivity for 15 years now, is that cultures are different with time, right? Like cultures, how time is spent is different. You just mentioned the Industrial Revolution. There's this great documentary called Time Thieves, and the focus is in European countries with this one, whereas most people, when they think about productivity, at least in my circles, they think about North America. They think about the UK, like they think about this side of the ocean that I'm on, as opposed to other cultures. And every culture works differently. Like Spain has a different way of operating. Italy has a different way of operating. Germany has a different way of and those things have been, like you said, that their roots go way back, right? Like they go further back than most people would even think to realize. And what's interesting to me, I mean, Japan has their own way of dealing with productivity as well. So I think that with remote work, what it allows you to do is it allows you to see all of the different ways, because there's no one right way of working, right? There is no one right way of being productive. Even when business isn't personal, productivity always is, right? And so this documentary talks about the very thing you're talking about, like quantitative productivity. Like, how many things did you make? Did you make those things? You didn't make those things? Okay, you're not done working yet. Like, and it gets rid of the quality part. And why I bring this up is when the Industrial Revolution happened, before that, productivity used to have another word. It was productiveness. It wasn't productivity. So productivity is still a fairly new word. And what productiveness meant was the state of being productive. And being productive means the power or ability to bring into being. It had nothing to do with the amount of things you made. So it wasn't about like, did you make 43 things today? It was, did you make things today? That's what productive was. And productiveness was the state. However, with the Industrial Revolution speeding things up, productivity became the new word because activity was the thing that you think about. So then all of a sudden, productivity became the definition of productivity was the power or ability to produce, comma, especially in abundance. So what that means is you produce things and plenty of them, a lot of them. So what we've done over the years, and I'd like to get back to the way things were, at least have balance, is our focus has been check off a lot of boxes, do a lot of things. They don't need to be all great. They just need to be things that you do. You need to check off. The more boxes you check off, the better. Not the better boxes you check off, the better. The more boxes you check off. So I think with remote work, what will happen is that we will find balance along with AI, which I'm sure you're leaning into a bit with your audience as well. AI is becoming a part of this as well. Is we will have a bit more balance between the quantity of what we produce and the quality of what we produce. And I strongly believe that remote work will play a big part in that. So I wanted to bring that up because there's a lot of people that think about productivity in a very, very one way, just one way. But the way we think about it is changing, and I think it's changing for the better.
Bien, y otro tema del que quería hablar es acerca de la sobrecarga tecnológica. En el trabajo remoto nosotros estamos con el celular, con la laptop, con la tablet, con los auriculares. Y vos has escrito un artículo frente a este momento, digamos, frente a esta circunstancia que uno tiene que pasar. Y la pregunta sería entonces, ¿cómo se puede evitar esa sobrecarga tecnológica?
I think we're at a point in history where tech is moving at such a fast pace, and it's kind of combining with the idea of being a consumer and buying things. So we want to have the newest, shiniest thing. We believe that having the newest, shiniest thing is the best. And I think that really this idea of minimalism and simplicity is becoming more important, especially it's weird the way the world works because a lot of the world is facing economic strife right now and problems with economy and inflation. And I think that that's going to slow down. I wouldn't say progress, but just this desire to have the newest and the best and the shiniest, maybe not the best, but the shiniest. So when it comes to tech overload, I encourage people to ask themselves, what do they really need? What is essential for them to get the work done? Not just physical tools like, headphones but also digital tools, right? Like also, it used to be that you would have a computer at home and then a tablet and then a phone, right? And then a watch, right? Like all these things can do a lot of those, but just because something can do it doesn't mean it should. Like we don't need to call my iPhone a phone for a lot of people because a lot of people don't use it to make phone calls. Instead, they're using it so if we start to think about the technology and the devices that we have, do we need three different do I need like wired headphones plus AirPods plus? No, I probably only need one. And so it's not a lesson that we're going to learn right away. But I mean, I will tell you that there is pushback against technology because I have a leather notebook that I keep a lot of my tasks in, and I use fountain pens. And think about watches, right? I mean, there is a push towards, we all know about the smartwatch, but there are a lot of people now that are going, I just want a regular watch that tells the time. I don't need this fancy smart. So I think we're in that point of history. We're in a real interesting space in general, but where people are like, I don't really need the newest thing, or I don't need as much of this. And as a remote worker, you don't want a lot of it because you want to be able to be mobile. You want to be able to go, I'm in Lisbon this week or for this month, and then I want to go to Thailand in a month. So you don't want to have a lot of things. So I think those values are changing. And so I encourage people to think about what they actually need to do their work and then find ways to eliminate the things that they don't, both at a personal level, but also at a company level for larger organizations. And I have to say, Christian, I think with the way that the world economy is right now, I think that those choices are being made for us sometimes instead of being voluntarily done. But I think that it's happening. The world nature has a way of making us do things that it feels that it needs us to do. And I think this is an example of that.
Bien, Mark, para finalizar esta entrevista, quería preguntarte si tenés algún autor, algún escritor, algún blog que recomiendes acerca del trabajo remoto.
Oh, wow. That's a great question about remote work. Liam Martin wrote a great book called it's called Running Remote. And he was one of the people at the forefront of this, and him and his team, Igor Borshenko is also involved, have this conference called Running Remote. They do it every year. Last 2 years have been in Lisbon. The year before it was in Montreal, which is the first one I went to. And if anyone out there, when it comes to people that I know a lot about this stuff, it would be Liam. So I would recommend Liam Martin's book. And I've had him on my podcast as well. Great guy, understands the way that remote work kind of came to be, but more importantly, he sees where it's headed. And I think that that's something that's really valuable. So I would say the work of Liam Martin is a really, really good place to start.
Bueno, Mark, muchísimas gracias por haber estado en el episodio hoy de La Gran Renuncia. Ha sido un placer hablar con vos.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation. Thanks so much.
Muy bien, y quien escuchamos en este episodio de La Gran Renuncia es a Mike Vardy. Hablamos con él acerca de la gestión del tiempo, el trabajo remoto y la mejor forma de aprovecharlo justamente para nuestra vida también en virtud de gestión del tiempo. Hablamos un poco acerca de cómo hacerlo más productivo y que no afecte a nuestro diario vivir o sacarle el mayor provecho para estos. Amigos, esto ha sido otro episodio de La Gran Renuncia. Para comunicarse con nosotros lo pueden hacer a podcastlagranrenuncia@gmail.com. Muchísimas gracias y hasta el episodio que viene.
Escuchaste La Gran Renuncia, un podcast producido por Roberto Schlesinger y Cristian Curto. Si te gustó, hace clic en el botón seguir y nos vemos en el próximo episodio.